They say money talks, but in the world of the Chicago Mafia, silence screams the loudest. Meet Sienna Cole. She was just a waitress at the city's most exclusive restaurant, invisible to the billionaires and killers she served. Until the night Caterina Valenti, the ruthless matriarch of the Valenti crime family, decided to break her for sport. She expected tears. She expected begging. What she got instead was a reaction so cold, so calculated, and so shocking that it silenced the entire room and brought the most dangerous man in the city to his knees. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about what happens when the prey turns out to be the predator. You won't believe who Sienna really is. The scent of truffle oil and fear always hung heavy in the air at Le Jardin. It was Friday night in downtown Chicago. Outside, the wind howled off Lake Michigan, rattling the streetlights on Rush Street. Inside, the world was golden, warm, and deceptively soft. Crystal chandeliers, imported from a defunct palace in Versailles, cast a forgiving light over the city's elite. Senators dined with hedge fund managers, tech moguls laughed with women who weren't their wives, and moving between them, silent as ghosts in their black waistcoats and crisp white shirts, were the staff. Sienna Cole adjusted the heavy tray on her shoulder, feeling the familiar burn in her trapezoid muscle. She was 24, but tonight she felt 40. Her feet, crammed into mandatory 2-inch heels, throbbed in time with the smooth jazz playing over the speakers. Table 4 needs a refill on the Cam 82 Lafitte, the floor manager, Henri, hissed as she passed the service station. Henry was a short man with a Napoleon complex and a sweat problem. And smile, Cole. You look like you're at a funeral. Maybe I am, Sienna murmured, though she pasted on the required pleasant expression. My rent is due in 2 days. We all have problems. Rich people don't pay for our problems. They pay for the fantasy, Henri snapped, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Look sharp. The Valenti reservation is in 10 minutes. The mood in the kitchen instantly shifted from chaotic to terrified. The Valentis. In Chicago, you didn't need to read the newspapers to know who the Valentis were. They owned the construction companies that paved the roads, the unions that built the skyscrapers, and, if the rumors were true, half the judges in the Cook County Courthouse. At the top of the food chain sat Gavin Valenti. At 32, he was the capo, the head. He was a modern don, the kind who wore bespoke Tom Ford suits rather than track suits, who had an MBA from Wharton to go with his street education. But everyone knew the real terror wasn't Gavin. It was his mother, Caterina. I'm taking the section, Sienna said, grabbing a fresh napkin. Are you crazy? Hissed distinctively rasp-voiced line cook, Marco. Caterina made the last waitress cry because the ice in her water was too cloudy. She's a witch, Sienna. A witch in Chanel. I need the tips, Marco, Sienna said, her voice steady, though her pulse ticked up a notch. Rent, remember? Sienna walked out onto the floor, her posture perfect. She had been working at Le Jardin for 6 months, keeping her head down, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing zero makeup other than the mandatory red lip. To the customers, she was furniture. To the staff, she was the quiet girl who never went out for drinks after the shift, never talked about her family, and worked double shifts without complaint. They didn't know that Sienna Cole didn't exist. They didn't know that under the polyester uniform, she had a scar running down her ribs from a knife fight in Naples 3 years ago. They didn't know that she spoke 4 languages fluently, including the specific Sicilian dialect the Valentis used when they wanted to discuss murder over risotto. She checked table 7, the prime spot in the corner, with the best view of the room and the most privacy. The Mafia table, as the busboys called it. At 8:05 p.m., the heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung open. The conversation in the restaurant didn't stop, but it dipped in volume, a collective intake of breath. Gavin Valenti walked in first. He was taller than he looked in the paparazzi photos, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of espresso and eyes that scanned the room like a security camera. He didn't look at people. He looked through them. He radiated a cold, magnetic power that made women stare and men check their watches nervously. Behind him came two bodyguards who looked like they were carved out of granite, and between them, holding Gavin's arm, was Caterina Valenti. She was 60, but looked a surgically enhanced 50. She wore a white fur coat despite the mild autumn chill, dripping in diamonds that probably cost more than the building Sienna lived in. Her face was beautiful in a sharp, predatory way. She looked like a hawk searching for a field mouse. Henry, the manager, practically tripped over his own feet rushing to greet them. "Mr. Valenti, Signora Valenti, welcome, welcome. Your table is ready." Sienna watched from the service station, her hands clasped behind her back. She saw Gavin's eyes sweep the room, bored, detached. Then for a fraction of a second, his gaze landed on her. Most men looked at Sienna and saw a waitress. Gavin paused. His eyes narrowed slightly, darker than the deepest ocean, assessing her like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit the box. Sienna didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She held his gaze for a heartbeat too long for a servant, then lowered her eyes demurely. Interesting, she thought. He's sharper than the others. "Water!" Caterina barked at Henri, snapping her fingers. "Sparkling! And if it's not San Pellegrino, I will have this place shut down." "Immediately, Signora," Henri squeaked. He turned and frantically motioned to Sienna. Sienna took a deep breath. She grabbed the chilled bottle of San Pellegrino and the crystal glasses. Game on. Approaching the table felt like walking into a lion's den. The air around the Valentis was colder, charged with a static electricity that made the hairs on Sienna's arms stand up. "Good evening," Sienna said, her voice smooth, low, and professional. "Welcome to Le Jardin." She moved to pour the water. She started with Caterina. The older woman didn't look up. She was busy inspecting the silverware, holding a fork up to the light to check for water spots. "This fork is filthy," Caterina announced, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. Sienna paused, the bottle hovering. She glanced at the fork. It was pristine. "I apologize, Signora. I will bring you a fresh one immediately." "Don't bother." Caterina dropped the fork onto the table with a loud clatter. "Just pour the water and try not to spill it. You look clumsy." Sienna's hand remained rock steady as she poured the sparkling water. "I assure you I am quite careful." Gavin was watching her. He was leaning back in his leather chair, one hand toying with a heavy gold signet ring on his pinky. He wasn't looking at the menu. He was watching Sienna's hands. "What is your name?" Gavin asked. His voice was a deep baritone, rough like unfinished velvet. "Sienna, sir." "Sienna," he repeated, testing the word. "You're new." "I've been here 6 months, sir." "I would have remembered you," he said simply. It wasn't a pickup line. It was a statement of fact. He remembered everything. "Don't talk to the help, Gavin," Caterina snapped, taking a sip of her water and grimacing. "It encourages them. And this water is warm. God, is it impossible to get competent service in this city?" The water was 40 degrees Fahrenheit. "I can bring an ice bucket, Signora," Sienna offered. "No." Caterina waved her hand dismissively, her diamond bracelets jangling. "Just take the order. I want the ossobuco. But tell the chef I don't want the gremolata on top. I want it on the side. And if the veal is tough, I'm sending it back." "And for you, sir?" Sienna turned to Gavin. "The ribeye, rare," Gavin said, never taking his eyes off her face. "And bring a bottle of the 05 Brunello." "Excellent choice," Sienna said. She gathered the menus. As she reached for Caterina's menu, the older woman accidentally knocked her wine glass, the water glass Sienna had just filled, with her elbow. Crash. The glass shattered on the table. Sparkling water soaked the white tablecloth and splashed onto the sleeve of Caterina's white fur coat, which she had draped over her shoulders. The restaurant went silent. "You idiot!" Caterina shrieked, jumping up. "Look what you did!" Sienna froze. She hadn't touched the glass. She hadn't been anywhere near it. Katerina had done it herself. It was a power move, a classic dominance display to humiliate the staff and assert control over the room. I didn't touch it, Signora, Sienna said calmly. Are you calling me a liar? Katerina's face went red. You clumsy little peasant. You bumped my arm. Look at my coat. This is chinchilla. Do you have any idea what this costs? You couldn't afford this in 10 lifetimes of serving pasta. Henri came running, pale as a sheet. Signora Valenti, I am so sorry. Please, please sit. He turned to Sienna, his eyes bulging with panic. Get a towel, now! Sienna didn't move. She stared at Katerina. The injustice burned. But it was the arrogance that annoyed her, the assumption that Sienna was just a punching bag. I apologize for the accident, Sienna said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the customer service lilt. But I did not bump you. The room gasped. A waitress arguing with Katerina Valenti. It was suicide. Gavin sat up straighter. His eyes flashed with amusement, or perhaps danger. He watched Sienna with renewed interest. Most people cowered before his mother. This girl was standing her ground. You insolent little tramp, Katerina hissed. She stepped around the table, closing the distance between them. She was shorter than Sienna, but her presence was massive. You will apologize. You will get on your knees and you will clean this water off the floor, and you will apologize for ruining my evening, or I will have you fired. And after you're fired, I'll make sure you never work in this city again. Sienna looked down at the spilled water. Then she looked at the heavy, expensive chinchilla coat. Apologize, Henri whispered frantically, grabbing Sienna's arm. Just do it, Sienna, please. Sienna looked at Gavin. He wasn't intervening. He was waiting. It was a test. He wanted to see if she would break. Sienna gently pulled her arm out of Henry's grip. She looked at Katerina, and a slow, cold smile spread across her face. It wasn't the smile of a waitress. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood. No, Sienna said. Katerina blinked, stunned. Excuse me? I said no, Sienna repeated, louder this time. Her voice carried clearly through the silent restaurant. I won't apologize for something I didn't do, and I certainly won't kneel for you. Your coat is wet because you knocked the glass over. Perhaps if you weren't so busy trying to assert dominance over minimum wage staff, you would have better table manners. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. A fork dropped somewhere in the back. Katerina's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No one spoke to her like that. Ever. You! Katerina shook with rage. She raised her hand, aiming a sharp slap at Sienna's face. It happened in a blur. Sienna's hand shot up. She caught Katerina's wrist in mid-air, inches from her cheek. Her grip was iron. She didn't just block the slap. She held it there, suspended. Katerina gasped, trying to pull back. But Sienna held fast. I wouldn't do that, Sienna whispered, leaning in close. You might break a nail. Then, Sienna leaned closer, past the shocked face of the older woman, until her lips were right at Katerina's ear. She switched languages, speaking in a rapid, flawless, and very specific dialect of Sicilian, the dialect of the hill towns where the Valenti family originated. Tu ghiocci alla regina, Caterina, ma tutti a Palermo sanno cosa hai fatto nell'estate del 89. Il figlio del fornaio non è scomparso da solo. You play the queen, Caterina, but everyone in Palermo knows what you did in the summer of 89. The baker's son didn't disappear on his own. Caterina's face went white. All the color drained from her cheeks. Her eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated terror. Sienna released her wrist. Caterina stumbled back, clutching her chest, staring at Sienna as if she were a ghost. Who? Caterina whispered, her voice trembling. Who are you? Sienna smoothed her apron. She turned to Gavin, who was now standing, his chair pushed back, his face a mask of intense calculation. I'll get someone else to clean this up, Sienna said coolly. I quit. She unpinned her name tag, dropped it onto the wet tablecloth next to the shattered glass, and turned on her heel. She walked out of the dining room, head high, leaving the most powerful woman in Chicago, shaking in terror, and the most dangerous man in Chicago, watching her walk away with a look of obsession burning in his eyes. Sienna pushed through the swinging doors of the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The adrenaline was a sharp, metallic taste in her mouth. Stupid, she scolded herself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. You just blew your cover. Sienna! Whom! Henri burst into the kitchen a second later. What the hell was that? Are you insane? Do you know who they are? I know exactly who they are, Henri, Sienna said, ripping off her apron and tossing it into the laundry bin. That's why I'm leaving. Mail me my check. You can't just leave. Gavin Valenti is asking for you. He's coming back here. Sienna froze. She grabbed her coat from her locker. She needed to vanish. If Gavin cornered her, he would ask questions. Questions she couldn't answer without getting herself killed. She shoved her feet into her street sneakers and pushed out the back exit into the alleyway. The cold Chicago air hit her face, sobering her. It was raining now, a miserable drizzle that slicked the cobblestones. Sienna pulled her hood up and started walking fast toward the L train station. She made it 2 blocks before a black SUV screeched to a halt beside her. The window rolled down. It wasn't Gavin. It was one of the granite-faced bodyguards. Mr. Valenti wants a word, the man said. It wasn't a request. Sienna kept walking. Tell him I'm busy. The car doors opened. 2 men stepped out, blocking her path on the sidewalk. They were big, professional. They didn't draw weapons, but the threat was clear. Please, miss, the bodyguard said. Don't make this difficult. He just wants to talk. He's intrigued. I'm not a tourist attraction, Sienna snapped. She calculated the angles. Could she take them? Maybe. But not without causing a scene, and there were cameras on the street corner. Get in the car, Sienna, a voice came from the back seat. The rear window lowered. Gavin Valenti was sitting there, shrouded in shadow. He looked calm, but his eyes were predatory. You speak the dialect of Corleone, Gavin said, his voice cutting through the rain. You possess combat reflexes, and you know about the baker's son, a story that was buried 30 years ago. Sienna stopped. She turned to face him. Who are you? Gavin asked, his voice softer now, almost intimate. Because you're certainly not a waitress named Sienna Cole. Sienna sighed. She walked to the car window, leaning down so her face was level with his. Raindrops clung to her eyelashes. My name is none of your business, Gavin, she said. And if you know what's good for you, you'll let me go. Your mother isn't the only one with secrets. Gavin smiled. It was a terrifyingly handsome smile. I don't care about my mother's secrets. I care about why a woman like you is serving steak to idiots. He opened the door from the inside. Get in. I'll take you home. No questions asked. Just a ride. Sienna hesitated. She was cold, she was broke, and she was in danger. Ironically, the safest place might be right next to the monster. If you try to touch me, I'll break your fingers, she warned. I'd expect nothing less, Gavin replied. Sienna climbed into the car. The leather was warm. The car smelled of expensive cologne and gun oil. As the SUV pulled away, merging into the Chicago traffic, Sienna looked out the window. She had started the night as a waitress. She was ending it as a player in a game she had spent 3 years trying to escape. So, Gavin said, pouring a drink from the car's crystal decanter. Where to? 5th and Vine? She lied. Liar, Gavin said smoothly. You live in the crumbling tenements on East 4th. I had my men run your file while you were arguing with my mother. Sienna stiffened. You work fast. I have to. My enemies are everywhere. Gavin turned to her, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, and I'm trying to figure out if you are one of them. The ride to the east side tenements was silent, filled with a tension thick enough to choke on. The rain had turned into a deluge, drumming a frantic rhythm against the tinted windows of the Escalade. Gavin didn't ask any more questions. He just watched her. He watched the way her hands rested loosely in her lap, not clenched, but ready. He watched the way her eyes tracked the side mirrors, checking for a tail. She wasn't acting like a waitress going home after a bad shift. She was acting like a soldier entering hostile territory. The SUV pulled up to the curb of a crumbling brick building on 4th Street. The streetlights here were broken, casting long, jagged shadows across the graffiti-stained walls. It was a place where people went to disappear. "You don't have to wait," Sienna said, her hand on the door handle. "I know," Gavin replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "But my mother is a vindictive woman. She doesn't like loose ends, and tonight you became a loose end." Sienna paused. She turned to look at him, her blue eyes piercing through the gloom. "I can handle myself." "I'm beginning to believe that," Gavin murmured. "But humor me. I'll wait until you're inside." Sienna slipped out into the rain. She didn't run. She walked with a measured pace to the front door, unlocked it, and disappeared into the dark hallway. Gavin watched her go, then tapped the partition. "Rocco, kill the lights. We wait." Inside, the building smelled of boiled cabbage and mildew. Sienna climbed the 3 flights of stairs to apartment 3B. Every muscle in her body was coiled tight. She reached her door and stopped. A tiny piece of clear tape she had placed near the bottom hinge was broken. Someone was inside. Sienna didn't panic. Panic was for civilians. Instead, a cold calm washed over her. She reached into her boot and pulled out a ceramic shard she kept there, a remnant of a broken plate she'd sharpened to a razor edge. It wasn't a gun, but it was silent. She unlocked the door loudly, feigning ignorance, and pushed it open. "Home sweet home," she sighed loudly, stepping into the dark room. The attack came instantly. A figure lunged from the shadows behind the door, swinging a heavy lead pipe. Sienna didn't just dodge. She flowed under the swing like water. She pivoted on her heel, driving her elbow backward into the attacker's solar plexus. The man grunted, air exploding from his lungs, and doubled over. Before he could recover, Sienna kicked the back of his knee, dropping him to the floor. But there was a second man. He stepped out of the kitchenette, holding a suppressed pistol. "Don't move," the gunman rasped. "Signora Valenti sends her regards." Sienna froze. The distance was too great. 10 feet. She could throw the shard, but if she missed, she was dead. "You're making a mistake," Sienna said, her voice steady. "The only mistake was you opening your mouth at the restaurant," the gunman sneered. He raised the weapon. Crash! The window behind the gunman shattered inward. A dark shape swung in from the fire escape, boots connecting squarely with the gunman's chest. The man flew backward, slamming into the refrigerator, his gun skittering across the linoleum. Sienna didn't hesitate. She dove for the loose gun, snatched it up, and leveled it at the first attacker who was trying to stand. "Stay down," she commanded. She glanced at the window. Standing there, brushing glass off his bespoke Tom Ford suit, was Gavin Valenti. He looked annoyed, as if he had just stepped in a puddle rather than broken into a 3rd-story apartment. "You have terrible security," Gavin noted dryly. "You followed me up the fire escape?" Sienna asked, keeping the gun trained on the intruders. "I had a feeling my mother wouldn't wait until morning. She lacks patience." Gavin walked over to the gunman, who was groaning on the floor. Gavin crouched down, his face hardening into a mask of cruelty. "Who sent you?" "Go to hell," the gunman spat. Gavin didn't blink. He grabbed the man's pinky finger and bent it back until it snapped with a sickening crack. The man screamed, a high-pitched sound that died in the thin walls. "I'll ask once more," Gavin said calmly. "Who sent you?" The Signora, Caterina. She said to make it look like a robbery gone wrong." Gavin stood up, dusting off his hands. He looked at Sienna. She was holding the gun with perfect form, finger off the trigger, stance balanced, eyes scanning the room. "You hold that Sig Sauer like you were born with it," Gavin observed. "I had a rigorous education," Sienna replied, lowering the weapon. but not safing it. "We can't stay here," Gavin said. "There will be more. My mother doesn't stop until she gets what she wants. Your apartment is burned. You're coming with me." "I'm not your prisoner, Gavin." "No." He stepped closer, the broken glass crunching under his expensive shoes. The energy between them shifted, the adrenaline of violence turning into something hotter, more electric. "You're not my prisoner. You're my problem, and I like to solve my problems personally." Sienna looked at her shabby apartment, then at the unconscious men on her floor. She had no choice. Her cover wasn't just blown, it was incinerated. "Fine," she said, "but I'm driving." Gavin smirked. "I wouldn't dream of stopping you." Gavin's penthouse wasn't a home. It was a fortress in the sky. Located on the top floor of the Valenti Tower, it overlooked the entire Chicago skyline. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a view of the city that looked like a circuit board of gold and amber. Sienna stood by the window, looking out. She had showered in one of the guest suites, scrubbing the smell of the restaurant and the fight off her skin. She was wearing one of Gavin's dress shirts, which hung to her mid-thigh, and a pair of leggings she had packed in her go-bag. She heard him enter the room. He had changed, too, into a black cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He held 2 glasses of whiskey. "Macallan 25, he said, extending a glass. "It helps with the shock." "I'm not in shock," Sienna said, taking the glass. She didn't drink. She just held it. "I know." Gavin walked past her and sat on the edge of a massive leather sofa. "Most women would be hysterical. You haven't shed a tear. You disarmed 2 hitmen and negotiated a getaway route. So let's drop the charade, shall we?" He took a sip of his drink, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Who is Sienna Cole? Because that social security number belongs to a girl who died in a car accident in Ohio 4 years ago." Sienna sighed. She walked over to the fireplace, where a gas fire flickered silently. There was no point in lying. He had the resources to dig until he hit bedrock. "My name is Alessandra," she said softly. Gavin stiffened. The name meant something to him. "Alessandra what?" "Alessandra Moretti." The silence that followed was heavier than the one in the restaurant. Gavin set his glass down slowly. "Moretti," he whispered. "The New York family. The one my father and mother went to war with in the late 80s. "The one your mother wiped out," Sienna corrected him, turning to face him. Her eyes were cold fire. "The baker's son wasn't a baker. It was a code name for my father, Dante Moretti. His cover business was an industrial bakery in Brooklyn. Your mother, Caterina, invited him to a peace summit in Palermo. She poisoned his wine, and then she sent hit squads to kill his wife and children." Gavin stood up. "I was a child. I was told it was a territorial dispute. I was told your father attacked us first. History is written by the victors," Sienna, Alessandra, said bitterly. "I was 12. My mother hid me in a laundry chute. I listened to them die, Gavin. I listened to your mother's men laugh while they did it." She took a step toward him. "I spent 12 years in orphanages, then on the streets, then in training. I learned how to fight, how to shoot, how to blend in. I became a ghost, and I came to Chicago for one reason. To kill her," Gavin finished. "To watch her suffer," Alessandra corrected. "Death is too easy. I wanted to destroy her reputation, her empire, and then I would let her die." Gavin ran a hand through his hair. He walked to the window, looking out at the city his family ruled. "So why didn't you let those men kill me tonight? If I'm a Valenti, I'm your enemy." "Because," Alessandra said, her voice softening slightly, "in the restaurant, when she slapped me, you didn't enjoy it. You didn't laugh. You looked disgusted. You aren't her, Gavin." Gavin turned back to her. The distance between them closed. He looked at her not as a threat, but as an equal, a queen from a fallen kingdom. "My mother is a cancer," Gavin admitted, his voice low and dangerous. "She undermines my authority. She makes reckless decisions based on ego. She is stuck in the old ways, the bloody ways. I have been trying to legitimize the family, to move us into tech and real estate, but she keeps pulling us back into the gutter." He stepped closer to Alessandra. He could smell the soap on her skin, fresh and clean. "If you go after her alone, you will die," Gavin said. "She has an army. You are one woman with a shard of glass." "I'm better than an army. I'm invisible." "Not anymore. Now she knows your face. She knows you know about Palermo." Gavin reached out, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. His touch was electric, sending a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. "But there is another way." "What way?" "We have a charity gala next Saturday, the winter solstice ball. All the families will be there, the politicians, the judges, the press. My mother lives for this event. It's her stage." Gavin's eyes gleamed with a dark, brilliant plan. "Come with me," he said. "Not as a waitress. Not as a ghost. Come as my fiancée." Alessandra blinked. "What?" "If you are with me, you are untouchable. According to the old laws, she cannot touch the dons intended. It will drive her insane. It will force her to make a mistake in public, and when she makes a mistake—" Gavin clenched his fist. "I will have the justification I need to remove her from the board, permanently." "You want to use me as bait," Alessandra said, narrowing her eyes. "I want to use us as a weapon," Gavin corrected. "We have a common enemy, Alessandra. Let's finish this war together." Alessandra looked at his hand, then up at his face. It was a deal with the devil. But looking into his dark, intense eyes, she realized that perhaps she was a demon too. She reached out and took his hand. "Deal," she said. "But if you double-cross me, Gavin, I won't hesitate. I'll burn this tower down with you inside it." Gavin smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "I'm counting on it." The week leading up to the winter solstice ball was a whirlwind. Alessandra was moved from the guest suite to the master bedroom. For security purposes, Gavin claimed, though neither of them slept much. They spent late nights plotting, reviewing the Valenti family ledgers, identifying the captains loyal to Caterina and those loyal to Gavin. But the real work was the transformation. Gavin hired a team of stylists, sworn to secrecy. They didn't just dress her, they armored her. "No pastels," Alessandra told the designer, a nervous Frenchman named Pierre. "I am not a flower. I am the blade." On the night of the gala, Alessandra stood before the full-length mirror in the dressing room. She barely recognized herself. The dress was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk, dark enough to look black in low light. It was backless, plunging dangerously low, held up by thin diamond straps. It hugged her curves like a second skin before flaring out at the floor. Her hair, usually in a tight bun, was cascading down her back in loose, glossy waves. Her makeup was sharp, smoky eyes and a blood-red lip. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. She looked like a Mafia queen. Gavin walked in, adjusting his cufflinks. He stopped dead in his tracks. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than a car, but he looked rough and masculine next to her elegance. "God," he breathed, his voice hoarse. "You look like trouble?" Alessandra smirked, turning to face him. "Like victory." Gavin walked over, standing behind her, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. He placed a velvet box on the vanity. "One last thing." He opened it. Inside lay a necklace of sapphires and diamonds. It was heavy, old, and unmistakably royal. "This was my grandmother's," Gavin said, fastening it around her neck. His fingers lingered on her skin. "My mother has wanted this necklace for 30 years. My father left it to me, to give to my wife. Wearing this, it's a declaration of war." "Good." Alessandra touched the cold stones. "Let's go to war." The drive to the Drake Hotel was silent, but this time it was a comfortable silence. A partnership. When the limousine pulled up, the paparazzi were already swarming. Flashbulbs popped like gunfire. "Ready?" Gavin offered his arm. "Always." Alessandra took it. They stepped out. The crowd went wild. Gavin Valenti, the bachelor king of Chicago, had a date, and she was stunning. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was stiflingly opulent. A string quartet played Vivaldi. Waiters circulated with champagne. At the far end of the room, holding court like a queen on a throne, sat Caterina Valenti. She was laughing with a senator, looking triumphant in gold sequins. Then the announcer spoke, "Mr. Gavin Valenti," and guessed. Gavin and Alessandra walked down the grand staircase. The room fell silent. Ripples of whispers spread outward. Who is she? Look at that dress, look at that necklace. Caterina turned. Her smile froze. Her eyes dropped to the necklace, the Valenti sapphires. The glass of champagne in her hand snapped. Gavin led Alessandra straight through the crowd, parting the sea of people. He walked right up to his mother. "Mother," Gavin said, his voice carrying clearly, "I believe you've met my fiancée, Alessandra." Caterina stood up, trembling with rage. She looked at Alessandra, recognizing the eyes of the waitress she had humiliated, but seeing the spirit of the enemy she had thought dead. "You!" Caterina hissed, her voice low so only they could hear. "The waitress! You dare wear my mother-in-law's gems? You dirty little peasant!" Alessandra smiled. It was the same cold, terrifying smile she had given in the restaurant. "They aren't your gems, Caterina," Alessandra said smoothly. "They belong to the Don's wife. And since you are merely the widow, and I am the future, I believe they suit me better." She leaned in, dropping her voice to a whisper. "And by the way, the osso buco at Le Jardin is excellent. You just have bad taste." Caterina's face turned purple. She lost it. "She is a fraud!" Caterina shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Alessandra. The music stopped. The entire room turned to look. "She is a nobody, a whore. Gavin, she is playing you. She is the woman I love," Gavin interrupted, his voice booming like thunder. He wrapped an arm around Alessandra's waist. "And she is the future of this family. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the captains, the politicians, the judges. "And I think it is time for a change in leadership," Gavin announced. "My mother is tired. She is retiring, effective immediately." The crowd gasped. It was a public coup. Caterina looked around, expecting her loyalists to step forward. But they didn't. They looked at Gavin, young, strong, ruthless, and then at Caterina, screaming, hysterical, old news. They made their choice. They looked away. Caterina realized she was alone. "You, she whispered, looking at Alessandra. "You did this." "No," Alessandra replied calmly. "You did this in Palermo, in '89. Karma is a slow poison, Caterina, but it always kills in the end." Security guards, acting on a nod from Gavin, gently but firmly took Caterina by the arms. "Let me go! I am the Valenti matriarch! I built this city!" Caterina screamed as she was dragged out of the ballroom, her heels scraping across the marble floor. As the doors closed on her screams, silence hung in the room. Then the senator whom Caterina had been talking to raised his glass to Gavin Valenti and his lovely fiancée. "To the Valentis!" the room echoed. Gavin looked down at Alessandra. "You realize we actually have to get married now, right?" "I can't break an engagement announced in front of the senator." Alessandra looked up at him. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by something warmer, something that felt suspiciously like happiness. "I suppose I can tolerate you," she teased, "as long as you don't order the steak well done." Gavin laughed, a true, deep sound, and kissed her. It wasn't for the cameras. It was for them. The wedding of Gavin Valenti and Alessandra Moretti was not just a ceremony. It was a coronation. 6 months had passed since the night of the winter solstice gala, the night Caterina Valenti had been dragged screaming from her own throne. In that half year, the landscape of Chicago's underworld had shifted tectonically. The old guard, those loyal to the brutal, chaotic methods of Caterina, had either bent the knee or vanished into the murky waters of Lake Michigan. The wedding reception was held at the Valenti estate, a sprawling compound of limestone and iron gates north of the city. The guest list was a who's who of power. State senators, tech billionaires, and the heads of the 5 families from New York and New Jersey, all flown in to witness the union. Alessandra stood on the marble balcony overlooking the vast gardens, where 300 guests were currently dining under a canopy of white orchids and fairy lights. The night air was cool, smelling of late spring rain and expensive cigars. She took a sip of champagne, the bubbles crisp against her tongue. She wore white, a custom Givenchy gown, with a train that looked like spilled milk, but around her neck, the Valenti sapphires glinted with a dark, heavy promise. Hiding? The deep voice came from behind her. She didn't turn. She knew the cadence of his footsteps, the specific scent of his cologne, sandalwood and steel. Gavin stepped up beside her, placing a warm hand on the small of her back. He had discarded his tuxedo jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal the tattoos on his forearms that most of the polite society downstairs pretended not to see. "Just observing," Alessandra said, leaning into his touch. "It's strange. 6 months ago, I was serving these people water and hoping they wouldn't notice my shoes were worn out. Now they're afraid to look me in the eye." Gavin chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "They should be. You're more dangerous than I am." He turned her to face him, his expression serious, bordering on reverent. "You did it, Alessandra. You actually did it." "We did it," she corrected him, smoothing the lapel of his shirt. "No," Gavin shook his head. "I provided the muscle. You provided the blade. Which reminds me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded velvet document holder. "I have a wedding gift for you. I didn't want to give it to you in front of the cameras." Alessandra raised an eyebrow. "I thought the ring the size of a skating rink was the gift. That was protocol. This is personal." Alessandra took the velvet folder and opened it. Inside was a property deed and a transfer of ownership contract. She scanned the legal jargon, her eyes widening as she reached the bottom line. Property, 1200 Rush Street, commercial entity, Le Jardin Restaurant. She looked up at him, stunned. "You bought the restaurant?" "I bought the building, the land and the business," Gavin said, a smirk playing on his lips. "I fired Henri this morning. He was very confused. I told him the new owner has strict standards about how staff are treated. I thought you might want to decide what to do with it. Burn it down? Turn it into a homeless shelter? Keep it and make the food actually edible? It's yours." Alessandra looked at the deed. A laugh bubbled up in her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated victory. The place where she had been humiliated, where she had scraped plates and swallowed her pride, now belonged to her. She owned the ground Caterina Valenti had walked on. "I think I'll keep it," she said, her eyes gleaming. "But the dress code is going to change, and the staff are going to get a very significant raise." Gavin kissed her, a deep, searing kiss that made the world spin. "Happy wedding day, Mrs. Valenti." "It's perfect," she whispered. "It gets better," Gavin said, pulling back. "Come inside. The news is about to start." They walked back into the private study adjoining the balcony, closing the heavy glass doors to muffle the sound of the string quartet playing downstairs. Gavin picked up a remote and clicked on the large television mounted on the wall. It was tuned to a national news network. The banner at the bottom screamed, "Breaking News." The anchor, a grim-faced woman, was speaking rapidly, in a shocking development regarding one of Chicago's most prominent families. Caterina Valenti, the dowager of the Valenti construction empire, has been formally denied bail this evening. Prosecutors have unsealed a federal indictment charging her with 3 counts of racketeering, and most notably, the 1989 first-degree murder of Dante Moretti and the subsequent contract killings of his family. Alessandra watched the screen, her face impassive, but her heart hammered a frantic rhythm. The screen cut to footage of Katerina being led out of the federal courthouse. She looked nothing like the lioness in the fur coat. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair grey and unkempt, her face gaunt without makeup. She was screaming at the cameras, but the sound was muffled by the glass of the transport van. She looked small. She looked pathetic. The case was reopened following an anonymous tip that included digitized ledgers from the late 80s, flight manifests, and a recording of a wiretapped conversation from 1990, where Valenti allegedly bragged about the Brooklyn cleanup. The anchor continued. Gavin muted the TV. "The recording," he said softly. "Where did you get it?" Even I didn't find that in the archives. Alessandra walked over to the desk and sat on the edge, crossing her legs. The silk of her dress rustled. "My father," she said quietly. He was paranoid. He wore a wire to the peace summit in Palermo. He knew Katerina couldn't be trusted. The transmission was garbled, buried in an old police evidence locker in Sicily for 30 years. It cost me half my savings and a favor from a corrupt carabiniere to get it. But it was worth it. "You played the long game," Gavin said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You were planning this before you even met me." "I was planning this since I was 12 years old, Gavin. Meeting you." Her eyes softened. "Meeting you was the only variable I didn't account for. You were supposed to be collateral damage. You were supposed to be just another Valenti I had to step over. And now..." "Now," she stood up and walked to him, placing her hands on his chest. "Now you are the only family I have left." Gavin covered her hands with his. The room felt safe, a fortress against the ghosts of the past. The revenge was complete. The monster was in a cage, and the baker's son had been avenged. "We should go back down," Gavin said eventually. "They'll be cutting the cake soon. And if we don't show up, my Uncle Sal will start singing Sinatra on the microphone." Alessandra laughed. "We can't have that." She grabbed her clutch from the desk. "Let's go." As they walked towards the door, Alessandra's phone buzzed inside her purse. She ignored it. It buzzed again, then a third time. "Popular tonight," Gavin noted, opening the door for her. "Probably well-wishers," Alessandra said. But a prickle of unease ran down her spine. Few people had this number. It was her burner, the one she used for old contacts, for the shadows. "You go ahead," she said, pausing. "I need to fix my lipstick. I'll be down in 2 minutes." Gavin hesitated, his protective instincts flaring. But he nodded. 2 minutes. Then I'm coming to get you." He left, closing the door behind him. Alessandra stood alone in the silence of the study. She opened her purse and took out the phone. The screen was bright in the dim room. There was a text message from an unknown number. Area code 718. Brooklyn. She swiped it open. Sender, unknown. "You look beautiful in white, Ali, just like Mum did." Alessandra stopped breathing. The phone shook in her hand. Ali. No one called her Ali. Not since she was a child. Not since the fire. A second message popped up immediately. "Good job on the old witch. You always were the smart one. But you missed a spot in the ledger. The money from the Palermo hit didn't just go to Katerina. It was split." Alessandra's thumb hovered over the screen. Her mind was racing, crashing through memories she had tried to suppress. The fire, the screaming, the smell of smoke. She had crawled into the laundry chute. She had thought her brothers were in their beds. She had seen the flames take the house. She typed back, her fingers trembling. "Who is this?" The 3 dots of the typing bubble appeared. They danced for what felt like an eternity. "You think you're the last Moretti? You think you're the only one who survived the fire. I was pulled out, Ali, but not by the firemen. By the Valentis." Alessandra gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "They raised me, Ali. They didn't kill me. They turned me into a pet, a weapon. While you were running through orphanages, I was being trained by the very people you just married into." The room seemed to tilt. If this was true, if one of her brothers had survived, and had been raised by a faction of the Valenti family. The final text came through. "Gavin isn't innocent. Ask him about Project Janus. Ask him who his father's favorite soldier was. I'm coming home, sister, and I want my share of the kingdom. V. Vittorio? Or Vincenzo? The door handle turned. Alessandra shoved the phone back into her clutch, her heart slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. Gavin walked back in, smiling. Time's up. They're waiting for the toast. He looked at her. His smile faded instantly. He saw the pallor of her skin, the slight tremble in her hands. He crossed the room in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. Alessandra! What is it? What happened? Alessandra looked up at him. She looked at the man she had just married, the man she thought she knew. Ask him about Project Janus. She searched his dark eyes. She saw love there, yes, but she also saw secrets, layers of Valenti history that even he might not have shared. Nothing, she lied, forcing a smile that felt like glass shattering in her mouth. Just a headache. The champagne. Gavin narrowed his eyes. He didn't believe her. He knew every micro-expression on her face, but he also knew not to push her when she had her walls up. Stay close to me, he said, his voice dropping to a command. Tonight, you don't leave my side. I won't, she said. She took his arm. As they walked out of the study and toward the roar of the party, towards the applause and the music, Alessandra realized the truth. She had won the battle against Caterina, but the war, the real war, was just beginning. The enemy wasn't outside the gates anymore. The enemy might be her own blood, or worse, the enemy might be the man holding her hand. She stepped onto the balcony, the diamonds heavy around her throat, and smiled for the cameras. And that is how a waitress brought down an empire and became the Queen of Chicago. But as that final text message revealed, the past is never truly buried. Who is V? Is Alessandra's brother really alive? And is he friend or foe? If you enjoyed this story of revenge, power, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells me you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss part 2, where we find out who V is, and if Gavin and Alessandra's marriage can survive the new threat. What do you think happened to the brother? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.